allowed the Union to win the war, but it also ruined a lot of people because they weren't aware of this. They weren't aware of history. And this is what I'm trying to warn people here. And I've been warning people for over a decade that eventually we'd have that, and how the riskiest thing to do is to have the currency. Monday, September 30th, 2024, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Well, we're going to look at a very interesting book today. It's called The Fourth Turning is Here by Neil Howe. I've recommended the original Fourth Turning by Neil Howe and Strauss. Strauss passed away some years ago, and Neil Howe has updated the first one that was written back in the 90s. And I was first made aware of the Fourth Turning by one of my clients when I used to work in the financial markets. And I did read the original Fourth Turning. For some reason, I don't have it anymore, so I bought the new one. And what we're going to look at briefly, of course, is that during the Fourth Turning, there is always political, economic, monetary chaos. Yes, things get really, there's upheaval. And at the end of it, things change drastically. And I'm not here to tell you what I think will happen, what the change will be, but to tell you that there will be chaos, in my opinion. And we're already seeing it economically, socially, geopolitically, and monetarily, debt-wise. Before we dive a little deeper into the book, just wanted to give a shout out to one of my affiliates. It's Wide Awake Clothing, and I have a link to their page in the description. And what is Wide Awake Clothing? Well, it's thought-provoking designs to awaken sleeping minds. So as you can see here, they have some very interesting t-shirts. Now with the fall coming, you might be also interested in hoodies. Or the autumn, of course, here in the UK. And I think it's a good way to wake people up, because if you're wearing something interesting, like the World Enslavement Forum t-shirt or the hoodie, people are going to look at it and ask questions, and you can try to explain to them what your view is. So yeah, if you're interested, there's a link below in the description to Wide Awake Clothing. Does it have anything to do with what we're going to talk about? The Fourth Turning is Here by Neil Howe. I think so, because if you are aware of what has happened in the past in history, and of course, history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. You can try to prepare yourself to make sure that you remain sovereign and independent as much as possible. And I agree that it's really almost impossible, of course, to do that. But I think you can go a long way to becoming sovereign and independent for yourself and your family and future generations, hopefully. But even if you can't, you still have to have it, I think, in your thinking that you shouldn't depend on some corrupt and sleazy politician to really help you out of a bind. You should do things for yourself. You should help yourself. You shouldn't expect, in my opinion, anyone to come and help you. Of course, outside your family, because that's what families are for, and even some close friends. So just going to go through here what it says about the book. Yeah, you can get it anywhere. I think I bought it on Amazon. And the full title is The Fourth Turning is Here, What the Seasons of History Tell Us About How and When This Crisis Will End. So, the visionary behind the best-selling phenomenon, The Fourth Turning, looks once again to America's past to predict our future in this startling and hopeful prophecy for how our present era of national crisis will restore over the next decade, and what our lives will look like once it has. Is this relevant for the rest of the world? I definitely think so, because the West, at least, has been, well, we in the West, and I mean Western Europe, and even probably the rest of the world, has been led by the United States since the last fourth turning, which was back around World War II. So it says here, 26 years ago, Neil Howe and the late William Strauss, yeah, I'd forgotten his first name, it's William Strauss, dazzled the world with a provocative new theory of American history. Looking back at the last 500 years, they uncovered a distinct cyclical pattern. Each cycle lasts roughly 80 to 100 years, the length of a long human life, and each is composed of 4 generation-long eras, or turnings, that always arrive in the same order. The last of these eras, the fourth turning, has always been the most perilous, a period of civic upheaval, national mobilization, as traumatic and transformative as the New Deal era and World War II, the Civil War, or the American Revolution. Today, right on schedule, the United States finds itself engulfed in yet another fourth turning. And so Neil Howe has returned with an extraordinary new prediction. What we see all around us, the polarization, the growing threats of civil conflict and global war, will culminate by the early 2030s in a climax that poses great danger and yet also holds great promise, perhaps even ushering in America's next golden age. Every generation alive today will play a vital role in determining how this crisis is resolved, for good or ill. Illuminating and sobering, yet ultimately empowering, The Fourth Turning is Here takes readers back into history and deep into the collective personality of each living generation to make sense of our current crisis, explore how all of us will be profoundly affected by the political, social, economic challenges we'll face in the decade to come, and reveal how our country, our communities, and our families can best prepare to meet these challenges head on. I'm going to stop here. And what I have to say about The Fourth Turning, and it's like the winter, really, if you read further, it's the winter, is that, yes, a lot is going on socially, economically, geopolitically, politically, domestically. There's a lot of polarization, which we're seeing, not just in the United States. We're seeing it in Western Europe and here in the UK as well. A lot of political instability. Look at how the last Tory administration had so many prime ministers, and look at how the current Labour administration that's been in power since the beginning of July is already teetering. There's talk that Keir Starmer might have to step down because of all these scandals. So yeah, that happens. But what I'm here to tell you is that on the monetary economic front, and that's what I cover here on this channel, yes, the other symptoms are very important in that we can ascertain that we are in the fourth turning. So what happens monetarily? Well, the old order, if you want to call it that, prior to the unraveling during the fourth turning, they face an existential crisis, just like I think the globalists are facing right now all around the world. And what do? Well, they double down. And how do they double down? Well, through inflating the system, the monetary system, through taxing, through wars. And wars, of course, are expensive and wasteful. So monetarily, the thing that suffers the most is the national currency that you have. And even back during the Revolutionary War, the war between the colonies and Britain, the colonists issued something called the Continental Dollar. And by the end of, or even before the end of the conflict, the Continental Dollar was worthless. They called it shin plaster because the note, the promissory note, and it was for silver, of course, was worthless, and you could use it as shin plaster. There's a note saying it's not worth a Continental. So who suffered from this? Well, it's the general public that is always, how can I say, convinced that it's the patriotic thing to do, to back the order that is in trouble or the order that is challenging. But they don't realize that even if the good guy wins, like they supposedly did from 1775 to 1783, that things will be much better. Yeah, they eventually got better, but a lot of people lost big fortunes because they thought it was the right thing to do, that they could trust the government or the governing body. So that's the first example of how the money is completely, or the currency is completely destroyed. But they need to do that. The new or even the challenging order or the old order, when they're fighting each other, they will inflate the currency. So that was the fourth turning then. And then we have to skip to the U.S. to the Civil War. Some people call it the war between the states. The same thing happened there. And it was very important monetarily, and very few people realized that it wasn't just the greenbacks that were important. It was the fact that the Lincoln administration and Congress passed the legal tender laws. I think it was 1861 or 62. I'm not sure, but I'll find out and I'll put it in the video here. And what are legal tender laws? Well, prior to that, Americans could pay their debts with any kind of coinage from any country. They were free to use French gold coins, French silver coins. I think the Spanish silver dollars were still used up until then. Yes, they had coinage minted by the United States, but they were all competing. And the thing is, they're not really competing because they're all gold and silver. But the legal tender law, what it did, it forced the public to accept the greenbacks. And the greenbacks, of course, went the same way of the Continental. And you could argue, yes, it allowed the Union to win the war, but it also ruined a lot of people because they weren't aware of this. They weren't aware of history. And this is what I'm trying to warn people here. And I've been warning people for over a decade that eventually we'd have that, and how the riskiest thing to do is to have the currency, be it the dollar, the pound, the euro. And it's why you need to hold some physical gold and silver to protect yourself and your family financially. So let's skip now to the other fourth turning from the Civil War. Well, it's the Great Depression and the beginning of World War II. Same thing happened there. And we have to go back a little bit to World War I. The U.S. joined World War I in 1917. And again, they lured, or they kind of used propaganda to get the public to finance the war. And of course, the bankers and the big corporations profit greatly. The general public, they put their savings into Liberty bonds or war bonds, and then they lose everything because it's inflated, and that's what happened. Billions were borrowed from the public, and they were gold backed because back then the U.S. was under a gold standard. But when it was time to pay a lot of those bonds back in 1933, we were in a Great Depression, and the government was broke. So what they did is they basically banned the ownership of gold. Executive Order 6102, not only did they ban it, but they negated all the contracts prior that made debtors pay creditors in gold, including the government. So, and then a year later, in 1934, they devalued the currency versus gold, but most people had a lot of people had handed in their gold. A lot of people didn't receive gold. They just received paper. So if you go to U.S. Revolutionary War, Civil War, Great Depression, and World War II, the currency, if you're holding the currency, you're going to be losing out. So that's where we're now. We're in the next fourth turning, according to Neil Howe. And is it any wonder that not just the dollar, but all fiat currencies around the world, and I would say that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the world has been under control by the American empire, or if you want to call it even the Anglo-American, it's a financial empire. And the same thing's going to happen. And holding any kind of government currency, government bond, up until the early 2030s is going to be a very big mistake, in my opinion, financially. So there you go. In the modern world, or even in the past, a lot of people think we will not make the same mistakes as our ancestors, and that everything is linear and everything always improves. And I think that's a big mistake. Because most people don't learn about their history and they make the same mistakes, and the same thing's happening now. So let's just quickly look at where the markets are this morning. So today, September 30th, is the last day of the quarter. Not that it is really important, but I guess fund managers and traders, hedge funds, people look at it, and yeah, things definitely look good for precious metals. And I think you need to look at it in terms of the long term. And long term here is 3, 4, 5 years. I think things are going to continue to get worse for the fiat currencies. But be as it may, right now, this morning, it's just going past 8 o'clock a.m. London time. We've got spot gold actually unchanged at 26.58. High's been 26.66. And the low has been 47. Silver as well is actually unchanged at 31.61. High's been 89 and the low 23. $32.50, of course, that's the key level for silver. Who knows? We could break it today even, and that would be even more bullish, I think, in the long term. One thing that seems to be popping up again is the yen carry trade unwind and the troubles in Japan, the troubles with the dollar versus the yen. Friday, the dollar reversed. It was at 146 and dropped to like 142. Right now, we are at 142. It has been below 142. And the Nikkei as well, not surprisingly today, in the regular hour, dropped almost 2,000 points, 1,918 or 4.82%. So right now, the problem for the BOJ is that the whole world is like cutting, doing stimulus. We've seen the Chinese, the Fed cut by 50 basis points. The ECB is going to cut next. So maybe it will give the BOJ a bit of leeway and they won't have to hike rates, because that's what they need to do. Hike rates because they're still very, very low rates, but they've dragged their feet for so long that they lost the opportunity to do that. And that could still hurt the overall financial markets around the world. And if you want to understand more about the Japanese yen carry trade and how it affects other assets and currencies, I'm going to put a video up there that I did at the beginning of August when things were kicking off, and also a playlist that I have, because I've been talking about the yen carry trade for many years and how it could be very dangerous for things. So that's what's going on right now. I see that the stock market, the indices the futures are pretty much unchanged. So there's not really much going on. It's fairly steady this morning. We are seeing, though, crude oil and copper trade up quite a bit. WTI crude is up over 1%, just below 69. Brent is at 72.40. And copper is up just under 1% at 465. So there you go. With that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.